Hello and welcome back to another episode on the Divine Daughter Project podcast. Today we are doing yet another section of the Women of Mormondom, where we're moving into some more stories of some of the women saints of the early restoration. And we're in a new place because I moved recently. Let's just hop right in. We're starting with a story related with Priscinda Lathrop Huntington. Priscinda is a woman of very strong character, and her life has been marked with great decision and self-reliance, both in thought and purpose. She was also endowed with a large inspired mind, the gifts of prophecy, speaking in tongues, and the power to heal and comfort the sick, being quite preeminent in her apostolic life. In appearance, she is the very counterpart of the Eliza Huntington, whose likeness is published in the book of the Huntington family. A mother in Israel is Sister Priscinda, and the type of one of the Puritan mothers in olden times. She was sealed to Joseph Smith, and for many years was one of the wives of the famous Heber C. Kimball. So, we have her brought up, and this is someone who obviously had spiritual gifts, was well acquainted in them. I find it interesting that it mentions her apostolic life, that even though she's a woman, she's not like quorum of the 12 apostles, obviously, but she still held a similar status in how she was viewed by some women of the church. She was one of the wives of Joseph Smith, and then one of the wives of Heber C. Kimball. Mother Huntington was a woman of great faith. She believed that God would hear and answer her prayer in behalf of the sick. The gift of healing was with her before the gospel was restored in its fullness. Thus testify her daughters of her mother, whose spirit of faith was also instilled into their own hearts, preparing them to receive the gospel of a great spiritual dispensation, and for that apostolic calling among the sick to which their useful lives have been greatly devoted. So I find it interesting here we have yet another account of women being healers. I believe that this is a spiritual gift very much tied to women, and this is just another one of those accounts. In Kirtland, she says, we enjoyed many very great blessings, and often saw the power of God manifested. On one occasion I saw angels clothed in white walking upon the temple. It was during one of our monthly fast meetings, when the saints were in the temple worshiping. A little girl came to my door and in wonder called me out, exclaiming, "The meeting is on top of the meeting house!" I went to the door, and there I saw on the temple angels clothed in white, covering the roof from end to end. And they seemed to be walking to and fro. They appeared and disappeared. The third time they appeared and disappeared before I realized that they were not mortal men. Each time in a moment they vanished, and their reappearance was the same. This was in broad daylight in the afternoon. A number of the children in Kirtland saw the same. So we see this spiritual gift here where the Spirit is so poured out among the saints of the early restoration that you have angels that are visible walking among them. Because we still have angelic visitations today, but I think most people would say that it's, oh, I feel this presence here, rather than see. So it's very interesting that they saw these angels walking back and forth on the temple, and that many people, especially children, were witness to that. I find it interesting that it was a child that came to her and was like, look, there's the meeting's happening on top of the meeting house, in reference to these angels. And I think this is also to show that I think there's a little bit more thinness of the veil with children. I would say probably mostly because of their innocence. One, they're so young, so they're closer to the veil, and then also they're so innocent, and so I think they can see through that veil a little easier than some other people can sometimes. And kind of goes back to that whole statement of be like little children. So I thought that was a great story. At another fast meeting, I was in the temple with my sister Zena. The whole of the congregation were on their knees, praying vocally, for such was the custom at the close of these meetings when Father Smith presided. Yet there was no confusion. The voices of the congregation mingled softly together. While the congregation was thus praying, we both heard, from one corner of the room above our heads, a choir of angels singing most beautifully. They were invisible to us, but myriads of angelic voices seemed to be united in singing some song of Zion, and their sweet harmony filled the temple of God. I think that we can have experiences where we can hear angels singing, whether we tell that it's a spiritual experience or we can just hear singing and it turns out to be angels. I think that's beautiful. I do believe that music is very much a language of heaven, as it can pierce our souls in a way that many other things cannot. Okay. This is part of a letter from Joseph Smith to, I believe it's Priscinda. And it says, but they know, this is near the end of the letter, but they know not what they do. This is talking about Joseph Smith is in prison and is talking about how perilous the times have been, how the saints are in distress, all these things. But they know not what they do not have any feeling of enmity toward any son or daughter of Adam. I believe I shall be let out of their hands some way or other, and shall see good days. We cannot do anything, only stand still and see the salvation of God. He must do his own work, or it must fall to the ground. We must not take it in our hands to avenge our wrongs. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. I have no fears, I shall stand unto death, God being my helper. I love this because it's really easy to be upset at people, or to want to try to make vengeance our own, to try to repay, get revenge, if you will. And that is not our place. We are not the judge. God is the judge. And we need to remember to leave the judgment in God's hands, and be willing to forgive. The New Testament, Christ talks about this, of forgive other people of their sins so that you may be forgiven, and things like that. And it's very important. There's a quote that I love that says, "Today I decided to forgive you, not because you apologize or because you acknowledge the pain that you caused me, but because my soul deserves peace." And it's much easier said than done, but I think that's something that is very important to do. I'm going to put this down before the Lord. I'm not going to keep carrying it. I'm not going to hold on to these grudges or this anger or whatever else. I'm going to lay these burdens down at Christ's feet. God will be the judge. Vengeance will be his. He will deal out justice and mercy according to his will. And I know that God is a good, just, and merciful God, and that he can take care of that. And so I'm going to leave that to them. And also, this, do not have any feeling of enmity toward any son or daughter of Adam. We should be able to recognize that the people around us are children of God, and we should do our best to try to treat them that way. These are gods in embryo. I think C.S. Lewis says that. Someone says that. But it's doctrine. The people around us are gods in embryo. They are children of God. God loves them greatly, and we should see that in the people around us and treat them accordingly, and treat them with the love and respect that they deserve purely by nature of who they are. And it's that love that turns the most hearts to God. We can be angry and we can tell people how they're wrong on this or that and how awful they are all day, but that's not going to get anyone anywhere. Yes, fear is a powerful motivator, but love will always triumph over fear. So. And then a little bit later, talking about the letter, it says, "Like his divine master, this, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. A great heart indeed had Joseph, and a spirit exalted with noble aims and purpose." I think this very much does speak to the character of Joseph and how good he was. And yes, Joseph wasn't perfect. He was a man like any one of us were. But that he truly did try to follow Christ and try to follow what Christ told us to do. And Christ was able to forgive his persecutors and those who killed him. And we should do our best to do the same. Okay. Continuing on, we're hopping to another story. where it is. Trying to see. So it's a woman comes across Parley P. Pratt. Okay. So it says, away to Canada with Parley. We halt with him in the neighborhood of Hamilton. He is an entire stranger in the British province, and without money. He knows not what to do. His narrative thus continues. The Spirit seemed to whisper to me to try the Lord, and see if anything was too hard for him, that I might know and trust him under all circumstances. I retired to a secret place in a forest, and prayed to the Lord for money to enable me to cross the lake. I then entered Hamilton, and commenced to chat with some of the people. I had not tarried many minutes before I was accosted by a stranger, who inquired my name and where I was going. He also asked me if I did not want some money. I said yes. He then gave me $10 and a letter of introduction to John Taylor of Toronto, where I arrived the same evening. So, Parley P. Pratt is headed to Canada, doesn't have much money, and so prays to the Lord for help, to which comes across a stranger and gives him money, and then sends him to John Taylor, who ends up being one of the apostles and then president of the church. He's the third president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think I included this story because it shows how God works through other people, and that there are times when our prayers will be answered immediately, and they'll be answered through people, and we need to remember to thank God for those, because God is the one who put those people in our path and in our life to help bless us. But it didn't come until after Parley P. Pratt had prayed. So that was a good story. So continuing on, he comes to John Taylor's house, and then there's John Taylor's wife, and it says, "Indeed," said the lady. Wait, hold on. I'm going to back up a little more. It says, "Ms. Walton, I am glad to see you. There is a gentleman here from the United States who says the Lord sent him to the city to preach the gospel. He has applied in vain to the clergy and to the various authorities for opportunity to fulfill his mission, and is now about to leave the place. He may be a man of God. I am sorry to have him depart." So, a friend came to talk to John Taylor's wife, and John Taylor's wife is, he's obviously a man of God, but he's not getting any progress anywhere, so he's going to have to leave. And so her friend responds, "Indeed," said the lady. "Well, I now understand the feelings and the spirit which brought me to your house at this time. I've been busy over the washtub and too weary to take a walk, but I felt impressed to walk out. I then thought I would make a call on my sister the other side of town, but passing your door, the spirit bade me go in. But I said to myself, I will go in when I return, but the Spirit said, go in now. I accordingly came in, and I am thankful that I did so. Tell the stranger he is welcome to my house. I am a widow, but I have a spare room and bed and food in plenty. He shall have a home at my house, and 2 large rooms to preach in just when he pleases. Tell him I will send my son John over to pilot him to my house while I go and gather my relatives and friends to come in this very evening and hear him talk. For I feel by the Spirit that he is a man sent by the Lord with a message which will do us good. The evening found me quietly seated at her house," says Parley, "in the midst of a number of listeners who were seated around with a large work table in her parlor and deeply interested in conversation." I love this story because, again, you have him trying to do the Lord's work. He's trusting in God of, I'll do my best to go where you lead me. I'm trusting in you to take care of me. And then these other people in the story, this other woman, listened to the Spirit. She could have not gone on a walk. She could have just kept going to her sister's house, not gone in at all. She could have gone in later. But she was in tune with the Spirit, and she listened to the Spirit and was able to bless Parley P. Pratt in the mission that the Lord sent him to do. And then she was blessed because she got to hear the gospel. So it's all these little things of God working through other people that I just love. Okay. We also have, after conversing with these interesting persons till a late hour, we retired to rest. Next day, Mrs. Walton requested me to call on a friend of hers, who was also a widow in deep affliction, being totally blind with inflammation in the eyes. She had suffered extreme pain for several months, and had also been reduced to want, having 4 little children to support. She had lost her husband of cholera 2 years before, and had sustained herself and family by teaching school until deprived of sight, since which she had been dependent on the Methodist Society, herself and children being then a public charge. Mrs. Walton sent her little daughter of 12 years old to show me the way. I called on the poor blind widow and helpless orphans, and found them in a dark and gloomy apartment, rendered more so by having every ray of light obscured to prevent its painful effects on her eyes. I related to her the circumstances of my mission, and she believed the same. I laid my hands upon her in the name of Jesus Christ, and said unto her, Your eyes shall be well from this very hour. She threw off her bandages, opened her house to the light, dressed herself, and walking with open eyes, came to the meeting that same evening at Sister Walton's, with eyes as well as bright as any other person's. The Methodist Society were now relieved of their burden in the person of this widow and 4 orphans. This remarkable miracle was soon noised abroad, and the poor woman's house was thronged from all parts of the city and country with visitors, all curious to witness for themselves, and to inquire of her how her eyes were healed. How did the man heal your eyes? What did he do? Tell us, were the questions so oft repeated that the woman, wearied of replying, came to me for advice to know what she should do. I advised her to tell them that the Lord had healed her, and to give him the glory, and let that suffice. But they still teased her for particulars. What did this man do? How were your eyes opened and made well? He laid his hands upon my head in the name of Jesus Christ, and rebuked the inflammation, and commanded them to be made whole and restored to sight, and it was instantly done. We'll give God the glory, for as to this man it is well known that he is an impostor, a follower of Joseph Smith, the false prophet. Whether he be an impostor or not, I know not, but this much I know, whereas I was blind, now I see. Can an impostor open the eyes of the blind? The widow Walton was baptized with all her household, John Taylor and his wife also, and John soon became an able assistant in the ministry. Okay, so you have the story of this widow healed of blindness, and I love how you see how many people are affected by this, because sometimes we look at healing, things like this, or miracles God does, and think it only affects the person the miracle happened to. So this widow was blind and now she can see again. But it also makes it so not only does this bless the widow, it also blesses her children, who now their mother can see and help take care of them better. It also blesses all the people who were taking care of her, because they're able to put more energy elsewhere, and so it says that she's less of a burden. I'm going to make a little side note on this, and I think it's important to not view helping people and serving people as a burden, but it can be at times when you have a lot going on, especially if you have a lot of children and you're trying to deal with a lot of things. It can feel like a burden sometimes. And so it's a blessing to them that they don't have to help her anymore. But also serving her in the first place was a blessing as well. I just want to make that known and clear, because I think it's important to remember that service is a blessing for us. Anyway, and then it also blesses her friend, Mrs. Walton, who Parley P. Pratt was staying with, and all her household, and John Taylor and his wife, and I think it's Mrs. Walton's son, John. All these people were blessed and joined the gospel because of this miracle that happened. I doubt it was that alone, but then it also gave an opportunity to preach the gospel to even more people. And you have people who are like, oh, yes, give God the glory, which, yes, God is, he deserves the glory. But the man's an imposter, he follows Joseph Smith. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to reevaluate this, because if you don't actually have access to the gifts of God, then you won't be able to do healings and things like this that can only be done through access to God's power. So I like how she responds of, whether he be an impostor or not, I know not. But this much I know, whereas I was blind, I now see. Can an impostor open the eyes of the blind? Kind of implying this, I don't think he's actually an impostor, because I don't think an impostor would be able to do this. So, That's beautiful. Okay, we're going to do one more story. We're going to go a little shorter today. The interesting story, which partly tells of the visit of the spirit of his wife to him while he was lying a prisoner for the gospel's sake in a dark, cold, and filthy dungeon in Richmond, Ray County, Missouri, will be the foregoing a charming sequel. While tortured with the gloom and discomforts of his prison, and most of all with the inactivity of his life of constraint, and earnestly wondering and praying to know if he should ever be free again to enjoy the society of friends and to preach the gospel, the following was shown to him, which we will tell in his own language. After some days of prayer and fasting, says he, and seeking the Lord on the subject, I one evening retired to my bed in my lonely chamber at an early hour. And while the other prisoners and the guard were chatting and beguiling the lonesome hours in the upper part of the prison, I lay in silence, seeking and expecting an answer to my prayer, when suddenly I seemed carried away in the spirit, and no longer sensible to outward objects with which I was surrounded. A heaven of peace and calmness pervaded my bosom. A personage from the world of spirits stood before me with a smile of compassion in every look, and pity mingled with a tenderest love and sympathy in every expression of the countenance. A soft hand seemed placed within my own, and a glowing cheek was laid in tenderness and warmth upon mine. A well-known voice saluted me, which I readily recognized as that of the wife of my youth, who had then for nearly 2 years been sweetly sleeping where the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest. I was made to realize that she was sent to commune with me and to answer my question. Knowing this, I said to her, in a most earnest and inquiring tone, Shall I ever be at liberty again in this life, and enjoy the society of my friends and the saints, and preach the gospel as I have done? She answered definitively and unhesitatingly, Yes. I then recollected that I had agreed to be satisfied with the knowledge of that one fact, but now I wanted more. Said I, Can you tell me how, or by what means, or when I shall escape? She replied, That thing is not made known to me yet. I instantly felt that I had gone beyond my agreement and my faith in asking this last question, and that I must be contented at present with the answer to the first. Her gentle spirit then saluted me and withdrew. I came to myself. The noise of the guards again grated on my ears, but heaven and hope were in my soul. Next morning I related the whole circumstance of my vision to my 2 fellow prisoners, who rejoiced exceedingly. This may seem to some like an idle dream or a romance of the imagination, but to me it was, and always will be, a reality, both as it regards what I then experienced and the fulfillment afterward. So, I have the story. Struggling in prison. His wife has died 2 years previous, and yet she comes to him. Again, in relation to God works through people. Yes, his wife was deceased at this point, but we know that people live past this grave, that life does not end with death. And so God not only works through people living on this side of the veil, he also works through people who live on the other side of the veil. And so she was sent to give him comfort and hope and answer his question. And I think that's beautiful. And I've heard stories from people where things like this still happen today. But you need to be in tune with the Spirit and be open to spiritual experiences and have the faith to have them happen. I also love that it was included that he remembered, he said, I'll be satisfied with just the knowledge of this one fact. But then once given the answer, he wants to know more and couldn't help himself, and so asked. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know yet. We'll see. And I love, just because it's this human moment, very, very, very human moment of, I actually do want. I have a lot more questions than just this one, and I know I said I would be satisfied, and it's so easy to do that. And I also love that it says, I instantly felt that I had gone beyond my agreement and my faith in asking this last question. And I think that's good. No, I think it's good to ask questions and look for answers, but also be content and be grateful with the answers you have already received. And don't turn those aside. And sometimes the answer is going to be you don't get to know yet, and that's okay. But I think that's a beautiful story. I think all of these are pretty beautiful stories. And like always, I skipped a lot of parts of this. I'm only pulling out selected portions. I highly recommend that you go read The Woman of Mormondom for yourself. That was chapters 21 and 22. So we only did 2 chapters today. Cut the video a little shorter. We're probably going to do a little bit of shorter videos for a little while as I continue to put some things together that I've been working on that will probably be longer episodes or be put out in more parts. So I hope these were some uplifting and encouraging stories for you today, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and I will see you all next week.